Practicing architects eventually have to tackle the question around as-is and to-be architecture development. How much is enough and where to focus modeling and analysis efforts are challenges you will face. In this video, we will explore factors to consider when modeling for enterprise change. In this lecture, we'll look at identifying the rationale for as-is and to-be architecture as a knowledge base, identify how gap analysis provides clarity to the process of modeling for a purpose, and determine how to select candidate as-is and to-be architecture artifacts. One of the results from the practice of enterprise architecture is a repository of explicit knowledge about the enterprise. This is generally done by iterative and incremental building of models and the conduct of analysis, as a part of addressing enterprise challenges, otherwise known as problems. The enterprise knowledge base is generally built upon the current enterprise interactions of structure and behavior, commonly known as the as-is or baseline architecture. Architecture artifacts are essential to understanding the environment in which the enterprise operates. We can use these artifacts, for example, to create understanding, such as a line-of-sight model to understand how technology and other assets support business operations and in turn help the enterprise meet its objectives. However, the enterprise is not static. It is an open system as a part of an ecosystem of other enterprises. Complexity and change are an active part of the enterprise's evolution. This means we must be able to examine alternatives, conduct analysis, and provide guidance about migrating to the chosen future state. Capturing these alternatives in the chosen target state, or to-be architecture, is central to the value of enterprise architecture by helping to inform decision makers with their questions around risk and resource allocation. Here is where the challenge arises. In order to be responsive to the nature of problem solving, enterprise architects must know how much architecture is enough. Not enough architectural analysis is likely to result in an incomplete recommendation. Too much architecture could result in paralysis of the analysis and make EA practitioners appear to be non-responsive to the time-sensitive nature of decision-making in today's enterprises. Architects must have an understanding of the enterprise's current state, as is, examine a range of target state, to-be alternatives, analyze them, and provide recommendations before changes to the enterprise are actually made. The implication is that we must focus on modeling for a purpose and not merely creating models for the sake of modeling. The phrase modeling for a purpose means enterprise architecture is a means of addressing enterprise problems and increasing knowledge and understanding. Solving for problems generally involves changes to the current as-is or baseline enterprise architecture. Identifying a rationale for making a change helps to keep architecture efforts focused, but it is more useful to understand the metrics of change. Knowing if the enterprise is looking to increase sales or meet regulatory compliance, etc., helps to give specific context and allows the practicing architect to focus on relevant architecture elements from within their meta-model. This results in developing relevant diagrams and models for analysis. Likewise, understanding the time to effect the change helps to inform EA practitioners around factors such as development of alternatives, analysis of those alternatives, and the amount of detail, and even the total level of effort required. Enterprise architecture efforts must be time-sensitive in order to be responsive to the decision cycle involved. The level of effort, scope, and detail for a 10 to 30-day decision is very different than, say, a 5-year planning horizon. Quantifying the gap also lets the enterprise architect practitioner know the nature of decisions as to whether they're incremental or transformational change. This informs recommendations about risk and resource allocation. Transition planning can occur at different levels, and it is not an all or none proposition. Examination of the nature of change informs the magnitude of the EA project. Likewise, the EA level of effort is commensurate with the magnitude of the change. Transformation changes that involve new direction and goals are likely to cascade changes at the strategic and tactical level. This will inevitably require viewpoints and views specific for leadership as well as more technical viewpoints and views to address related but different questions such as systems interfaces, etc. Likewise, A change in technology may or may not change business priorities or enterprise goals and directions, thus may not require the same number of viewpoints and views. Of course, having architecture artifacts provide traceability, quote, up and down the enterprise capability stack is always important in helping to express how the different parts of an organization fit together. Keeping in mind that any given EA project is focused on a set of stakeholder concerns, the enterprise architect should look at what he or she needs to develop in both the as-is and to-be stages for analysis. The idea is to create sufficient, or quote, just enough architecture to support analysis of alternatives and evidence-based decision-making. Let us look at the following possible scenarios. In the first situation, we need to develop a high-level architecture to address questions about regulatory compliance. This would likely involve a look at capabilities all the way through to the enterprise technology stack. However, to-be architecture may not be required as no change is occurring so much as trying to understand and address questions around the nature of compliance within the current enterprise. In the next scenario, we're told the enterprise wants to change an existing on-premise technology stack to a hybrid approach that makes use of vendor services to address potential cost savings. We know that additional as-is views are likely needed to increase our knowledge and understanding about the technology to be changed and the magnitude of that change. An incremental change, such as using remote data storage, may have limited impact on business functions and changes, whereas using software as a service options could have major implications as the software to be adopted may have or may not have the same functionality or interfaces. The implications are that a little or extensive to-be architecture could be required at multiple layers to examine the impact and associated risk to business operation. The architect needs to clarify these details. This could have some implications to data and information elements as well, which in turn could have downstream implication. Now we will look at a scenario involving process change as a part of improving efficiency. We will need as-is artifacts to look at the current situation. Likewise, we can also anticipate to-be alternatives to be developed and analyzed. Assuming that this is not a new capability or function, we are not likely to have an impact on the enterprise strategic or capability architecture layers. However, we could have impact the definition to data and information architecture. There's also the possibility of changing software configurations with user interfaces, but development of these artifacts could be deferred until initial process alternatives are analyzed for utility. The decision around developing as-is and to-be artifacts is driven by the challenge being addressed and less about any single framework, tool, or methodology itself. Architects need to frame the problem statement and look at how they will conduct resulting analysis as a part of driving the development of models, lest they fall into the trap of developing models that provide no immediate value to the questions being asked. This should not be construed as an exhaustive list of factors, but they are a start point to consider when pondering which to-be artifact to develop. The objective is to build your approach around the problem being addressed and looking at how your analysis is to be conducted as it impacts the enterprise as a system. We hope you found this video useful, and if you did, if you please consider giving us a thumbs up and perhaps subscribing. Please feel free to check us out on www.viacinstitute.org. Thank you so much.